Hey everyone, it's Sunday and time for a new episode of Record Collecting with the Quill. Today we're going to discuss this album, the 1987 Black Sabbath The Eternal Idol album. Is it a yay or is it a nay? Well, follow me in this episode for a more elaborate discussion. But before we start, you know the drill, make sure you subscribe, hit that little notice bell, and also share with your friends. Well, discussing and following Black Sabbath over their 50 plus career is certainly interesting. There's tons of stuff. You have so many different eras of the band and different singers and members of the band, and to some extent, I collect all things Black Sabbath. And as I said, there's so much stuff to choose from. But the Tony Martin era has been sort of forgotten in a way. If you ask me, some stuff has been re-released, but some stuff are still waiting to be re-released. But I thought we'd discuss this one. It's the first Tony Martin album, The Eternal Idol, from 1987. And I have a couple of different, a couple of CD pressings of the album, but some singles and even some cool bootlegs. As I said, this was really a transitional period for Black Sabbath. They made the Seven Star album, intended to be a solo album by Tony Iommi, but by record label Pressure, it was released as Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. Glenn Hughes on vocals, totally new band with Eric Singer later in Kiss and Alice Cooper band. You had David Spitz on bass and also Jeff Nichols staying on keyboards. And those guys recorded the previous album, started a tour, but just a few shows in, Glenn Hughes was replaced by a young American called Ray Gillen, was totally unknown at the time. And they finished the tour. And then was time to make another album, and they traveled to Air Studios, Montserrat in the Caribbean, and started working on what became the Eternal Idol. But they ran into problem quite quickly. As I said, Ray Gillen was really inexperienced singer and had a really hard time coming up with lyrics. And they also ran into problems with the bass player, Dave Spitz. It's discussed, or it is two different stories as to why. The first one is being Jeff Glicksman, the producer, not liking him as a player, and the other was that he had some sort of family emergency and had to go back to America to sort that out. Anyway, they ended up hiring or calling Bob Daisley, Ozzy's bass player and great songwriter and lyricist, and he agreed to fly over to Montserrat and help them writing lyrics, finishing the songs, and also provide bass for the basic tracks. And I think they were on a roll there for a while. They recorded all the basic tracks, they recorded vocals, and were more or less finished. I think there were guitar solos missing when all of a sudden Ray Gillen decided to leave the band. He was feeling that the band wasn't going anywhere. There were management problems, people weren't getting paid, and around the same time Eric Singer decided to leave the band as well, because of these problems with not getting paid and so forth. So the recording stopped there, with both the drummer and the singer leaving the band. So they relocated, went back to the UK, to London. And around this time, they also decided to fire the producer, Jeff Glicksman. They weren't seeing eye to eye. And sort of regroup, found a new singer in Tony Martin, a local guy from Birmingham. Was basically unknown as well. He had some previous experience, but was in no way famous. And he ended up redoing all of Ray Gillen's vocals, sort of note for note. And then ran into problems again with the producer they hired in the UK, Wick Coppersmith Heaven, and once again decided to go for a third producer for the album, and ended up finishing the album with Chris Tsangarides or something, I don't know, you tell me, finishing the album in Battery Studios. I think he did the last overdubs, and he also mixed the album. And it was released in November of '87 in the UK and December '87 in the US. to mixed reviews, and no one really cared actually about Black Sabbath around this time. There were a lot of problems with the band. For first, they didn't have a drummer, they didn't have a bass player, and the credits on the album are sort of a mishmash. You have Eric Singer, who provided all the drum tracks, are credited, but you also have Bev Bevan, who played with the band on the Born Again tour, credited. But as far as him playing on anything on the album, well, Jeff Nichols said he did a couple of cymbal rolls on the instrumental track Scarlet Pimpernel, but he didn't play any drums at all. And Dave Spitz's name is on the album, even though he left the recording, and Bob Daisley is playing all of the bass. But Bob declined their offer to join Black Sabbath, and then Dave Spitz sort of was in the front line to be the bass player for the tour, so they decided to credit him on the album, even though Tony Iommi was hoping that Geezer Butler would rejoin the band around this time, and they went so far as to rehearse with him, but then Geezer decided to decline as well, since he didn't like the manager at the time, Patrick Meehan. So they ended up with Bev Bevan and David Spitz doing a show in Greece, the first show with Tony Martin on vocals, and then they were booked to do a string of shows in South Africa and Sun City, but Bev Bevan refused to go, so they had to get another drummer again, and they got a guy called Terry Chimes from Clash, and he played with Cherry Bombs and Hanover Rocks as well, and he stayed for the rest of the touring cycle of Eternal Idol. But once they got home, Dave Spitz decided to, once they got home from South Africa, Dave Spitz left the band again. So they had to get another bass player, a guy called Joe Bird, who also stayed for the rest of the tour. But as I said, the tour was quite short. They only basically toured in Germany and Italy. No shows in England, no shows in the US. And as I said, the album sort of tanked. People weren't really interested in Black Sabbath around that time. Ozzy was a lot bigger by himself, and as I said, all these turmoil with members coming and going, sort of people lost interest in the band. And it's a shame, if you ask me, because here comes my opinion, because I think this is a great Black Sabbath album. I bought this, as I say, it came out in '87. It's probably one of the first, I don't think it's the first I bought by Black Sabbath, but certainly like second or third. I bought it around 1989, and around at the time when you were young, whenever you bought an album, you listened to it because you didn't have that much money. So whenever you bought something, you really had to listen to it. And this is one that I listen a lot to. And it's interesting, looking back, I think over the time this one has sort of been re-evaluated. A lot of people tend to sort of hail this one because it is great. It's great songs to start with, and Tony Martin sings really good. Some great riffing from Tony Iommi as ever, and it's interesting, as I said, because if this one would have been released today by the same group members, it would probably be hailed as a supergroup. Being that you had Bob Daisley on bass, he was well established around this time, but you also had a young Eric Singer, who by now is one of the most sort of recognized drummers in hard rock, but here he was young and just starting out. He did this, as I said, the Seven Star album, and he did play with Lita Ford before, but he was still young and basically unknown around this time. But a great group. His playing, Eric Singer's playing, is a little bit more basic here if you compare to, especially to Badlands or the other Kiss stuff he did on Revenge, but it suits the album perfectly if you ask me, and it's a shame that it hasn't been played. They played a couple of songs from the album on the short tour, and then in '95 they played The Shining, but otherwise this album has sort of been forgotten by themselves, which is a shame. As I said, there's so many great. The Shining, the first song, fantastic one. It's a song that held back to around 1984. There's a version of it called No Way Out they recorded a sort of a early version of it with David Donato, who was in the band for like 30 seconds. I always enjoyed Hard Life to Love, Glory Ride, Born to Lose. Yeah, well, if you ask me, there's not really one bad track on this one. Certainly a favorite of mine in this Black Sabbath catalog. And over the years, this is the only vinyl copy I've got. There's not really that much. I've been searching for a Japanese version with the obi, but haven't found it yet. And I believe it's in Italy and maybe Spain as well. The cover is, the logo is just plain white with no red in it, but otherwise there's hardly any sort of cool other copies to collect. Nonetheless, there are some other stuff. This one I acquired a couple of years ago. The Shining, it's the single from the Netherlands, and what's interesting here is you have a pre-Hellas Cross version of Black Moon was featured on the album that came after this one, but this is a recording with the Eternal Idol lineup, and they re-recorded it for Hellas Cross. Not one, a bit difficult to find, and also this one, the 12-inch version, has another B-side that wasn't on the album, a track called Some Kind of Woman, which is probably the most untypical Black Sabbath song ever. It's more in the style of Boogie Van Halen or something, with double bass drumming in the style of Alex Van Halen. This one is also a pressing from the Netherlands. This one is quite difficult to find, I believe. I've had it for almost 30 years, a nice copy, with also, of course, Black Moon. And then you have a bunch of different CD versions, the first one being this one. And then in 2010 came the expanded version, the deluxe edition. And what's cool with this one is that for the first time they released the Ray Gillen recordings from Montserrat. They're not finished mixes, and some of the tracks are missing guitar solos and stuff, but it's still cool to have them sort of to compare with the Tony Martin versions of the songs. And I think some songs Ray Gillen did better and some songs Tony Martin did better, but it's nevertheless cool to sort of have them both so you can compare. Nice one. And also there's a few different bootleg versions that are interesting to have as well, both released from Japan. I got them from Japan. This one being the Eternal Idol instrumental demo, so it's, I think this is our recordings from Montserrat without any vocals at all, and you also have this one, the Eternal Idol working tracks, with vocals, so you can sort of follow the songs, how they evolve, which I think is really cool. And it would have been cool if they could have put some of that on the expanded version as well, but we'll see. Maybe one day the record label will cave in and do yet another expanded edition of it. But as I said, one of my favorite Black Sabbath albums, and probably it's a little bit because as I said, it was one of the first ones I got, but I still think it holds up really good. And as I said, over time this one has stood the test of time, sound wise and song wise, and as I said, with great players on it as well. Now I'm really curious to hear, what do you think about this one? Is it a yay or is it an A? Are you one of those who can only stand Black Sabbath with Ozzy or with Dio, or can you sort of see the whole picture and listen to the Tony Martin albums as well? Well, let me know in the comment section. I'm eager to hear what you have to say about this one. And also make sure you follow the Quill on social media. It's the Quill Sweden. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well. That's it for now. See you all again next week. Bye.